So today is July 9th, 2021. My name is Maria Saldana, and I'm here with Brian Delgado. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Can you start by telling me when and where you were born?
Okay, so I was born in Lima, Peru. I was born in January 8th, 1990.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's a Capricorn?
I am a Capricorn. A very early Capricorn. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you grow up?
So in Lima, I grew up in maybe one of the most dangerous maybe districts of Lima. It's called La Victoria. La Victoria, it's a very small district that in the past 15 years has grown up a lot because it has one of the biggest markets, and a lot of people from other states of Peru have been investing there, and it has blown up a lot, but unfortunately it's just a money making place, but it's not, you don't see it in the actual district. Like, it hasn't evolved. So unfortunately, it's a very corrupted district, a small, and currently it's a very unsafe place in many ways. But most of my family, if not my whole family from my mom's side, they moved there in the 70s, when it wasn't like that, when it was full of crops, when it wasn't even a city. So a very different scenario when they moved in, and then the family kept growing, and I ended up and I ended up there,
Mhm. Yeah. It sounds like, this La Victoria has gone through tremendous shifts in terms of even its.
Tremendous shifts. And not many people that I know of that are from Peru are from La Victoria. So yeah, yeah, I'm a very proud Victoriano. Very, very proud.
Okay, so you named that your mom's side, moved to La Victoria
Yeah.
in the 70s.
Yes.
So where is your family from then? La Victoria or
So my family from my mom's side is from Lima. From my dad's side is from Ica, which is a southern state in Peru. And but my father's family also moved to Lima, and my father's family moved to La Victoria for a little while, and that's where my parents met. They met in high school, and yeah, and that's how everything happened.
yeah. Okay. So mainly, okay, so your parents met in Lima, your dad's family also from Ica.
From Ica, yes.
Okay. And then so where did you grow up in Lima or
I grew up in Lima from until I was 13 years of age. I was in La Victoria. I lived close to my mom's side of the family. I grew up with them. So I'm much more attached to them than to my dad's side of the family, because I would see my grandma every day. Um, and yeah, we were a very close, big family. It's a big family from my mom's side, but we were all very close. Like, my grandma would live here, then her daughter would live like under her, and then the other one would live like in front of her. Like, the whole family was in the same neighborhood, literally. So we grew up in an open door situation, in which, like, you come in and you come out. You don't even say hi. Hi, Tia, what's for food? Let's eat. Like, you didn't even ask. And my mom's, yeah, like I said, my mom's side of the family is big, and they're very tight. I feel very lucky that I've grown up in my mom's side of the family, because they're very tight, they're very protective, and they were also one of the families that in the whole district everybody knew us, because we were one of the first ones that moved there. So in many ways, my grandparents were very respected, very respected. Yeah.
yeah. Wow, your relationship, right, with your family, your mom's side. I imagine that even those relationships in Peru, but what that's like, right? To navigate those relationships in Peru must look very differently. You said that you lived there.
Yeah,
Um,
because I was an only child and I didn't have brothers or sisters, but in many ways, sometimes I think that I didn't really need to. I had my cousins, my grandma. My grandma was very close to me, like extremely close to me. And my grandma, like we all in our family took care of our grandma because my grandma has her own story. She was left alone when she was really young. She's from Arequipa and she moved by herself. Her and her brother, they moved by themselves to Lima and they would sell food on the streets. And then they got picked up by two different families. My grandma never saw her brother again. My grandma ended up working in the house of my grandpa. She was just being the maid and she fell in love with the son of her boss.
mhm.
And that's how it was. So my grandma didn't have anybody else. And I think that made everybody to be so close to her and so caregiver of her. We were really tight and she was really like the matriarch of the family, even more than my grandfather. She was literally like, the one to go to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You speaking of your grandmother reminds me of mine.
Mm,
And I feel like that's something that, for a few people that I've spoken to, it's almost like their grandmothers, or at least the women in their family, right, really were the
yeah,
ones that like kept the family together, ran the
totally. Strong women figures for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Brian. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I actually do it very proudly because anytime I get to speak about my grandma, I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart is like happy that someone else gets to hear about her because I I admire her a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
I'm honored that you were able to share a bit about your grandmother.
Yes, yes, yes.
And okay, so would you share a little bit about your relationship to your Peruvian identity?
Okay. That's a very interesting question because I went to a private school that was, even though it was private school, we were kind of like under military rules. It was a very patriotic school in many ways. We were part of many like national competitions of like marching. So I attended every year to the national district competitions of marching. So definitely, and I studied folklore dances too. Because I've always liked dancing, I would say that's definitely one of, at that time I didn't see it as a hobby. I really, really loved it. It was maybe the biggest passion at that time when I was a kid. So I studied dances from different parts of Peru and I would go to competitions inside of Lima. I never got to go outside of the state, but inside of Lima, I was always in the team that represented my school. So definitely on a yearly basis, if it wasn't marching, it was always folklore dancing. So definitely that kept me very tight to the idea of a Peruvian identity. But more than anything, I fell in love with Andean and not only Andean, but also just from music from every part of Peru, whether it was the coast, the Andean, or the rainforest area of Peru. But yeah, definitely, I grew up really tight to that.
Yeah, it sounds like
It was I was very tight to the of dancing because because of school.
yeah.
Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you can see me now. Perfect, perfect.
No worries. Yeah, so you're naming that the school that you went to, right, was it sounds like very patriotic, right? Very,
A
very,
lot.
very much tied to, this nationalism in Peru. Uh,
Yeah, a lot.
yeah, and it also sounds too that you were able to then explore different forms of connecting with Peruvian culture, right? Through
A
dance.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, through dance, I got to meet a lot of other students from different schools and teachers too. And I remember at that time I learned that my grandfather from my dad's side, he was part of the national dance team of folklore in Peru when he was younger, which I didn't know. So I was tied to dancing and to the whole idea of culture because of school, because of school, because of school, and because of my also my family now from my dad's side.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's interesting to hear that you have these connections also, in this, like, currently enacting, like, traditions through dance, but then it also sounds right, like having these connections to other members, other generations of your
Yeah,
family.
I was always pushed towards the culture side, whether it was family or whether it was school. It felt like I was yeah, definitely going into that direction.
Mhm. So is it meaningful for you to have a relationship to Peru or to your Peruvian identity?
Yeah, definitely. That's a very interesting question because I asked myself that question 2 years before because my family in Peru, they always ask me, would you come back to Peru? Would you come back to and live here? And I feel like my answer has changed too as I have evolved and I've matured and I've sort of been able to reflect back on that past and that connection with culture. I definitely feel that I got I appreciate it a lot more. I'm definitely proud of it. Um, and I've noticed that I'm very much intrigued by learning about other people's experience in Peru too. So yeah, definitely I would say that I have a big or huge interest in the cultural aspect of Peru. And well, of course, since I work in art, how art is growing there too, that definitely gets my attention to a lot.
Right. And you named the ways that you did that in the past, right? When you were growing up in Peru. But how do you maintain your relationship with Peru or your Peruvian identity currently?
Right now, currently. So I would definitely say that I during this time during the pandemic, I started collaborating with dancing schools in Peru. I wanted to kind of go back, even though I can go back full time. During the pandemic, I started communicating with a lot of schools in Peru, and I started attending Zoom classes, like folklore dances, and I did them through Zoom. And I felt that it felt really good because kind of a nostalgia in a way to just remember when I used to do it, of course, but it was interesting to connect to the generation that lives now in Peru and to see them and to hear, their way of thinking and their passion. It was just interesting. And I felt in a way that even though I'm so far away, I was still connected. So that to me was very important. And I, unfortunately, when school started, I had to stop it. But it's something that I really want to go back to, and that I feel like I have a huge connection, especially if I like dance so much. It becomes a great bridge to connect me to my culture too.
I love that you've been able to go back to the ways that you once, felt close to Peru. And I love hearing that,
Yeah.
it's been possible for you to still do that now, right? Even through,
Yes, it was amazing. It was
yeah.
amazing.
So I'm curious then, how has the experience of living in the diaspora, right, living outside of Peru, how has that affected your Peruvian identity?
Oh, I would say when I came here, I think when you come from Peru at the beginning, you kind of leave Peru to the side at the beginning because you're so caught up into getting into the new system where you're moving to. But once that happens, the first thing you do is you're running to that Peruvian restaurant trying to get something that reminds you of Peru. So I would say that little by little, I've connected more to Peru, uh, or I've tried to maintain that relationship. It has been hard, but also I think it depends on finding other people like you, other Peruvians that are here, and you know being part of the Peruvian community wherever you are, that keeps you connected there, and that will keep that bridge of connection alive. And at least that has been the way for me and for my mom, you know. That's definitely how we've maintained that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and you named something really interesting in that you said that, you know, when you're first migrating somewhere, right? And this might be an experience that a lot of folks have. I definitely remember watching my family go through it when we first migrated.
Mm.
Is that it's true, right? Because suddenly you're not in your home country, you're not in your
You don't have anybody.
right. And it's like, and whether you do have folks, right? So my some of my dad's family was here, but my mom has no one, right? My mom, it's still to this day her. And
Mm.
and it's like one of those things, right, that you have to learn how to navigate a completely different country, the culture, the customs, all of it, right? And then
And how to maintain that connection, you know, even if like your mom, she's alone, how to do it.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's going to look differently for different folks.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, and in that sense, I think that's part of the reason why I was always really drawn to methods of storytelling, right? Like
Uh,
I think that hearing people's stories for me was always a way to maintain that connection.
mm,
But also, you know, I remember when I entered academia, I didn't see Peruvians, right? It was very different. And at the same time, I didn't just see them within my community, but I didn't see Peruvian narratives in texts.
no,
I didn't see
no, you
them
didn't.
in articles. If they were, they weren't written by us, you know? And on top of that, right, queer Peruvians were just not there.
Ooh, that's
Um,
even harder. Even
yeah.
harder. Even harder.
So, you know, it's, you know, for me, I realized that our stories were missing. And so I think that's, you know, one of the reasons why I'm archiving these testimonios. But I also think, you know, for me,
Yeah.
being queer Peruvian, it has been, you know, central to how I move through my life, right? Central to how I think about how I maintain these connections.
I think, you know, that every testimony, I'm going to take it into my world since I see it mostly in like pictures. I think about it in a way in which each testimony reveals a new part of what the whole photograph of what that connection is like. And I think I'm also drawn to that. I think it's interesting. And I think it's beautiful to allow people to be heard.
Mhm. Absolutely.
That's really the magic of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, you Brian, with your art, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about your art, about your photography
Hmm.
you do.
Yeah.
um, but you
Um,
brought
I,
here, you know, this photograph, if you want to expand on that.
yeah. I mean, I was into dancing, like I said, folklore when I was a kid, and this kind of connects to the queer aspect of it because growing up in Peru, being a male dancer, my gosh, it's tough. It's really tough, especially when most boys are playing soccer, most girls are playing volleyball, and it's so structured that if you're a dancer, you're already maricon. You are already that. And 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 as a kid, that the way it sounds now is different to me. You know, if someone calls me maricon, I'm like, yeah, cool, that's what I am. Perfect, yeah. But when you're a kid, it changes. So that word also has evolved. And but um, I love dancing. I couldn't continue dancing because my dad was told that if I continued, I was gonna be a maricon when I was growing up. So of course I couldn't continue. And that got stopped right when I was about to finally go out of state. So that dream was sort of stopped completely. What else could I do? My grandpa had a camera, and I was always playing around, playing with a camera, taking photos of friends. And that playing became much more serious, but to the point where, you know, I went to university here. I pursued a career in you know, in fine arts, and my work at the beginning was all about taking photographs of dancers. I had to go back to my roots. That was the only way that I could still continue to like do something that I love with another passion of mine. So my photography at the beginning was definitely me showing what I couldn't have. And then it has transformed into into showing what I want other people to notice about me. Sometimes when I can really say it into words, I'll then try to speak about it in an image. So it has become like an extension of my words, of my thinking. So definitely that's, you're there? Okay. So yeah, that was definitely how I saw it, you know. That was my connection with photography. Yeah, and it has continued all the way till now. It is, for me, it is all about, trying to still use my photography to connect myself to the stuff that I couldn't do before. So that's literally, I created another bridge in many ways. Photography became another bridge.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Because it sounds like the even the shift between the art, right, that you were doing seems still very tied to what it meant to navigate notions of your identity, right?
It started to touch it, to tangle it without me noticing. Everything was connecting.
Right. And so on that note, right, like what about your queer identity? Can you talk to me about your queer identity a little bit more?
That was really hard for me because it's interesting, I didn't, I feel like in a way it started kind of cliched. And when I was really young, uh, I was abused when I was in kindergarten. That was that was a bad start, honestly, a terrible start to that part of who I am. But at that time, when that incident happened, that definitely shifted my personality, and I became someone timid, someone shy. And it wouldn't be until I was 12, 13 years of age when I again asked myself, why is it that I'm looking at guys more than girls? So it started as questioning. And then I tried to tangle the topic with my parents, and I saw that my dad was resilient and resistant of it. So I became much afraid, just like anybody would be afraid. I was very afraid to touch it, to even talk about it. I started having girlfriends just to cover it up. I felt that me in Peru being gay at that time in the 90s, it felt way harder than maybe if you ask someone right now, or maybe it's the same. But at least for me, that's how it felt at the beginning. It felt like I kind of knew what I was, but I wasn't accepting of it because I was just afraid, just like anybody. I was afraid that I wasn't going to be accepted. I already had to stop dancing because of that, in a way. So but never though I thought of, okay, this is going to be bad and this is going to stop me from who I am. I never saw it as wrong. I just always saw it as timing. When is the right timing for me to do it? And yeah, and I actually feel very lucky that I think from the get-go, my identity, I connected it with timing and with being mature enough to say, okay, when it's the right timing. But then also I've asked myself, why do I have to have a timing too? So yeah, it's been a bumpy road, but a successful one, definitely, if I'm going to talk about now. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for sharing, a little bit about what that journey looked like for you. Because, I hear you naming this fear that you had to even name your queerness, right, or to bring it up around folks. While also I hear you naming, being very aware of what other people's perceptions were, of who you were, how you carried yourself. I hear that as well, right? And it definitely does impact how we feel in terms of like, who are we going to tell, right? Who are we going to share this with?
It reshapes our path. Mm-hmm. It makes us maybe go a little bit more right than left. So definitely. Yeah. And I also think that, everybody takes that journey in such different ways. Mm-hmm. In many ways, I also think that being so overprotected maybe made me be more thoughtful and careful. But again, yet again, at this point in my life when I am way more when I'm definitely out, I keep asking myself, why did I have to constrain those feelings at that time? Like, was that right? Was that not right? Definitely those questions are in my head as far as my journey.
Yeah, and you also touching on time, right? I imagine that even that process wasn't, I don't think that queerness is necessarily a linear process, right? Because
It's not a linear process at all.
yeah,
I don't
because
think so. No.
you're constantly faced with different scenarios, you're constantly
It's
having.
a lot of things at the same
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what does queerness mean to you?
What does queerness means to me? Oh my gosh. Interesting question. Right now, uh, first word that comes to my mind is excitement. Excitement for me to be completely free of who I am. I think that it feels like sometimes ourselves we put ourselves in like cages, and we don't say things. Now I'm more open than ever, and I feel like every day I'm myself, and being myself for me means being queer, being accepting of me, loving me, and being so accepting of other people that it makes me happy to be thinking and feeling that way. So it's definitely always, for me, it has been a given and receive situation. But it makes me happy that I am accepting myself so much that I feel like I am accepting of everybody too. And that's a kind of like a full circle of excitement and happiness and openness.
Yeah. This a reciprocal exchange, right?
A reciprocal exchange, yes, which is such a key thing for me.
Mhm.
Reciprocity is important, so
Yeah.
important.
And the excitement that comes with that too, right? To be able to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like that excitement needs to be shared for those who are starting on the path of finding, you know, who they are,
Mhm.
especially in the LGBTQ community. We really need someone to light our way at the beginning, because
Mhm.
it's really dark at the beginning. So definitely, I would say it's a reciprocal cycle in which we should all be activists and participants of passing the torch.
Mhm.
Okay, now you get the torch, you get to light up your way at the beginning, and you're gonna pass it to someone else. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? To be able
Yeah, it actually feels really beautiful too. Yeah.
to be able to see other folks on this journey too, right? And
Yeah.
be able to,
It's rewarding.
yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Mhm. And so, what does queer community mean for you?
Ooh, the queer community. The queer community for me, the first thing that I think of is bravery for sure. Every time I think of anybody from the queer community, I think of what they had to go through to get to the point where they're talking to me face to face and they're happy for who they are. So I'm always thinking, I'm always trying to put myself in the shoes of others. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what did you go through? And let me appreciate your present too. Let me appreciate your present so that I can understand your past and not judge you. I think of it as what it should be, a judgmental free community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you found a queer community?
Wow. I do think that I have. It has taken me a long time, but yes. Um, I think uh, I think finding a queer community comes along finding yourself and the maturity that comes with accepting. So it's kind of like a process in a way, like you accept, okay, this is who I am. This is who I am. And at the same time, you get these opportunities to connect with other people. And, that's how I feel about it. I definitely feel very connected to a lot of people in the queer community that I can call friends or even a family. It really becomes a family. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that that you have been able to find this community, this family, right? Because
Yes, I do. I have. I've been fortunate enough. It's been we call each other actually a family. We're a group of 6 people that, we're tight and we're really, really close and we help each other. And we're all in different countries. And
Mhm.
we're all from Peru and we're all keep connected to each other and we all keep that identity pretty much well alive. And we all definitely practice reciprocity.
That's beautiful. I think that
Yeah, I feel very lucky. Yeah.
yeah, and it makes a difference, right? Like
Whew,
as
huge
to
difference.
how we I feel how we feel even within ourselves, right? Because I think that our identities are so relational, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, absolutely. So what does it mean for you to simultaneously identify as Peruvian and queer?
Wow. I actually feel that I have still a lot more to do as a Peruvian, knowing my culture, knowing what we can offer. I think it comes into a little bit of proudness, I will say, proud of who I am, proud of my culture, but also knowing that there's still so much to do, that we get to be at a point of maturity. We really need to be helping our community too. So it's a weird feeling because I feel like I still want to do more. It's hard to respond because I feel like I haven't done enough yet to connect to my queer community in Peru as much as I would love to. But I think there should be a huge connection that in many ways is going to spread and help not only culturally but socially into many aspects of anybody in the queer community in Peru or outside of Peru. So definitely them both together is something that I'm looking forward to make stronger connections to other people too, and to make a bigger impact.
Absolutely. And you naming that, right? There's pride, right? You feel proud
Yeah, there's a lot of pride for sure.
and you feel that too, right? But you can also acknowledge the work to be done, right?
And yeah, we still need a lot to be done, and a
Yeah.
lot to be done for the community in Peru, the queer community in Peru. A
And
lot.
do you feel then that your identities coexist in the same spaces?
My identity with what?
So your queer and your Peruvian identity, do you feel they coexist?
Oh, oh yes, totally. They go hand to hand. They're almost like a one single thing, person, being. Definitely, I think again, my interest in my whole country makes me, of course, think of others like me, like I said before, who are starting on the journey of being queer in a society that keeps oppressing them. So for sure, there is a big connection. It feels, like I said, as if it's one single goal, you know. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts about what it means for you to have your identities, to feel proud in them.
Hmm.
And you're also touching on what it then means to be able to have connections with queer folks in Peru, right? And I think
With
that
queer folks, yes, it's
and I
very
think that
necessary.
that process can often be difficult, right?
Mm,
Like when you're living not just in Peru, I imagine, right? There's different levels of safety that we're navigating, but also in like when you're in the diaspora, right? To form those connections, I imagine
yeah,
it's difficult, at least for
it
my
is. It is. It is necessary. It is necessary to do.
experience.
Yeah. It's something that I feel like it still needs a lot of work to be done.
Right.
Peruvian communities in every place outside of Peru should definitely become like the beacons that connect towards the young queer people in Peru too.
Mhm. Do you
Yeah.
feel that you've been able to do that in some ways?
I've been able to do it in the lowest spectrum, in the very closest spectrum of it. But I feel though that I haven't been able to reach out as much as I want. I want my hand to reach farther. Um, so I feel like that's missing for sure.
Mm.
I feel like that drive is missing.
I hear you. I hear that. So I'm curious then, how do you feel Peruvians perceive queer folks, and what makes you feel this way?
Wow, how do Peruvians wow. Unfortunately, generally, I would say that still being queer in Peru, it's not something that people get appraised for sure. It's not. People still being targeted, lives are still being, targeted just for being part of the queer community. So unfortunately, I think if right now we would do a survey, maybe the results would be different. I'm hoping that it would be different and it would be much more positive than negative. But I think that the majority, though, still does not look at the queer community as part of the Peruvian community as at all. It's kind of like outcasts completely. You're not Peruvian, you're queer. Like the whole Peruvian thing gets taken out the moment you say you're queer. It's like your flag gets stripped away from your skin just for being queer. So I think that there's still that stigma towards queer Peruvians.
Yeah, and just as you're saying, right, that it's like your flag gets stripped from you, right? Like I
Your flag gets stripped from you, literally.
and I'm imagining, just envisioning what that, just in the most basic sense, envisioning that what that means, right?
Graphically, it's horrible.
Right?
Yes.
Like it's like, wow, I'm really sitting with that, and it's not to say, right, that Peru is the only country like that, right?
No,
Because even
no,
in the
not
US,
at all.
right? Like even in the US, we constantly are hearing about
Yes,
violence.
homophobic arts for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, all the time.
And just like sitting with the fact that, like in Peru, in the States, in the diaspora, there is a disproportionate amount of harm and violence, right, towards queer
A
and
lot of violence. Yes.
um, and it's something that I think, right, is a reality, right, to name. Um, and so my question to you, and this might be a big question,
Oh,
but I'm just thinking, we know that, right? We've named that there's harm, we've named that there's violence, and I'm just curious how we as queer Peruvians, right, how do we survive the harm and the violence, right? And how do we
how do we survive the harm? I think we have to go back to those strong female figures that we've had. The women in Peru have faced so much, and I know that this might be a whole different topic to talk about feminicidios, which is a big, huge thing that has has harmed our societies horribly. Um, have made in many ways our women to be so strong leaders, and those strong leaders were moms of queer kids, and those queer kids looked up on their moms fighting every day. So definitely that makes our queer community one that's always brave enough to continue, and a very fighting community too. So I think that those attributes have been passed on from those strong women figures. Yeah, there's a big connection there, I think.
and I also feel like there's that connection too, right? You naming feminicidios, Peru has some of the highest rates
It's
of
horrible. Yeah,
right?
it's actually something that's horrible. Yeah.
And right, I also think that seeing what that, like where that comes from too, right? Like knowing that it's deeper, right, than just
It's deeper.
a one-on-one thing, right? It's a structural thing, right?
It's unfortunately it is. That's the way the structure of our society has been, and it's when it's for it to break. That's where maybe the conflict is arising.
right, absolutely. And how that's tied to, right? Because even
It is so tight.
like in the feminicidios, we also don't have proper stats
We don't.
on trans violence, right? On
We
trans,
don't.
right?
Never.
Absolutely.
Never. You never hear about trans violence ever. Oh my gosh, that's even harder to hear.
Right. And to then know how to move forward from that, right? At a structural level.
And not that makes resources to be so scarce. One thing leads to another for sure.
Absolutely. It's all tied in. But I also think naming that, going back, right, and thinking about how these strong women, right, these strong figures, these matriarchs,
Yes.
have been able to do it, right, and I think admiring them, not just admiring them, but learning from them, right.
Learning and doing it, and doing it in the process. The queer community definitely learned from them, from the matriarchs of every family for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. I wonder if there are any other identities that are salient to you that you would like to share.
You mean as far as myself?
Yes. So you touched on your queerness, your Peruvianness. I wonder if any identities.
Any other identity? That's very interesting. Well, Peruvian, definitely, but I'm also very proud of being Latin American. That's definitely one that's in my head. I think that the continent in itself, these borders that we have, only have separated us more than united us. And as cliche as it may sound, the together we are, the stronger we are, and I feel like that is something that's being missing. So I do have a definitely a very strong Latin American identity that I'm also very proud of that. For sure, yeah. Yeah, definitely. That definitely. I don't think of any other identity that would come up to my head, but I do see Latin America as a whole, you know.
Absolutely.
I think that's important to see it like that, I think, for me.
Yeah. And so, you even touching on borders, right? Like these borders
Mm,
weren't there pre-colonization, right? Peru,
they
like,
were not there. The borders were not there.
right. It was just land, right? It was our ancestral lands that were there. Borders
Yeah.
didn't exist in that way, right? Um, and I'm curious then, you're naming your identities, and you're touching on real impacts that you've had, right, on how we hear queer and trans folks, what they have gone through, what we're continuing to survive, right. And just to give you background, right, so I do work that centers queer and trans Black, Indigenous people of color, right. So I was trained in Black feminist methods. I was trained in the healing
Mm,
justice. So I get really
wow.
curious, right? So there's a piece of storytelling here that's really crucial, but I get really curious as to how folks are centering wellness, how they view healing, how they are healing. So my next few questions are going to touch a little bit more on that, on
I'm
those aspects.
healing. Okay. Okay.
So what does wellness look like for you?
Wellness. Interesting. Wellness. I would think of the first thing that comes to my mind with wellness is being at a state of knowing who you are, accepting of who you are, being proud of who you are, not being afraid. Yes, being yeah, yeah, definitely being just good with who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. What about healing? What does healing look like for you?
Oh, healing. I think healing is like breathing. They should just go together. I think we heal every day, but healing needs to be seen not as something negative. It should be seen as something constructive. People should be more proud of healing because healing denotes that you are progressing, that you are seeing the errors and moving forward. So that should be something that people should be proud of. Yeah, I think healing is something that everybody's doing right now. Healing is something that I'm proud of currently, very proud of. Necessary, like breathing every day, every hour, every day. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking of what you said about, healing should be looked at something, to be proud of, right? Not as a negative thing. I think often
Mm-hmm.
we have the perception of healing as something that, you know, something bad happened, and so it's like, oh, I'm so sorry that you're having to heal from this, right? But really,
Yeah, but we shouldn't say we're so sorry. We should say, you know,
right,
I'm glad that you're healing. That's good.
right.
Let me help you. How can I help you to make, you know, maybe you can make that heal process smoother for you.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's also having to shift what that narrative looks like around healing too.
Having to shift it is what's for people is hard too.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. What does community look like for you? You touched a little bit about having, you know, this,
Community,
but I'm
interesting.
wondering what community in general has looked like for you.
One of my biggest dreams, you know, if usually when you get that question of how do you see yourself in 10 years, that very classic question, I'm always asking or saying, I mean, I'm always responding as I see myself creating a community, creating like a place where people can always go to without even asking. That sort of open door mentality that I had with my family, that tightness and connection, that is for me a community, knowing that I can count on you wherever you are. And it's not, a community does not have to entail this many streets together. It entails people being together mentally at heart. So we could be a community even if we're like in two continents apart. We can still be a community. So community is definitely a relationship that's actually bigger. It's kind of like a polyamorous relationship in a sense that everybody should be helping each other. Everybody should find comfort and help in the healing process too. So yeah, that definitely for me, yeah,
Mhm.
that is community.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say, you know, being able to create within this community too, right? Like even within your art. Um, so I'm curious as to how you have seen community show up in your life.
Ooh, wow, what an interesting question. Um, I would say on the hardest moments, honestly, personally, on moments where, you know, on the beginning of new healing processes is when you really see the tightness of that community. In my case, the art community, teachers being there for me, even students being there for me, my friends, my family, my queer community being there for me, helping me, giving me food when I didn't have. I have seen community again in those situations, usually on moments where I really, really, you know, need them. But also knowing, I mean, I've also felt community too. Um, Sometimes on just even having little conversations, you know, um, just sharing information with someone that you trust. I feel like that also shows community too.
Mhm. Yeah, and as you were saying too, right? I like how you described it as this polyamorous, almost relationship, right? Because
It is a polyamorous relationship.
yeah, because I think that the ways that we are expressing our care, right, our support and our love towards folks, right, that though each of those relationships looks very differently, and yet
Oh, a lot. It looks so different. One from another. They all look different. Super, super different.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yet I imagine that they all do something different too, right? Like
Completely. Completely.
they
Yes.
have their different roles. They might nourish us in different ways, right? And I'm also curious about pleasure. So I'm big on thinking about pleasure.
Pleasure.
And I'm wondering if pleasure comes up for you at all when you think of your intersecting Peruvian and queer identities, or how you move through life.
Pleasure. Interesting. I'm gonna connect pleasure to satisfaction, to being satisfied with knowing the good connections that I have. I think it's nice. It's good to be aware of the present, of being grateful of the people that you've created a community with. So I find pleasure in those reciprocal moments in which I feel that I've in which I feel that I am helping someone else that has helped me before. That's where I feel the pleasure. It's always in that cycle of reciprocity and help and community that I feel it has been present in the queer community as a Latin American and as a Peruvian as a whole. So yeah, that's how I would connect it to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love hearing how you see it connected. Also, it sounds to your relationships, you know.
Ooh, relationships.
Yeah, because you're naming this reciprocity, right? But that's also it sounds, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, also tied to how your relationships are moving. And I'm wondering, if you can expand a little bit more on what that has meant for you within
relationships.
Yeah, maybe within your community, right? Like how does that pleasure show up perhaps within the community in this reciprocity that you named?
Oh, interesting. I would say as I started to meet more people within the queer community, hearing what they were going through, allowing them to be heard because they were also hearing me, which was again part of that reciprocity process. That I believe that cycle, the response between one another, being able to be present for each other, that may be one of the first times in which I felt not only the pleasure, but I also felt community too. So a lot of those things were checked in moments where I was helping others within the queer community. I'm trying to think of other moments, but I'm very connected to the people that I'm connected to. It's usually people that it's reciprocal in the sense that not only we do hear each other, but we're definitely present in each other's lives. I'm trying to think of other examples, but yeah, I'm very close and connected to my queer community, my friends, my family. And the only thing that I can think of is that connection, that reciprocity, that response, that being present all the time, that it's been years and we're still there, that I know that I can count on them, that I know that in 10 years, whenever I get married, they're going to be in that picture. I don't even have to even think about it. Knowing that, feeling that, definitely that gives me pleasure too. Knowing that I can count on them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love hearing that you feel that way, right? About the folks that are that you consider to be part of your community. Are there any other ways that pleasure comes up for you?
You mean as far as community?
Any just pleasure generally? Any other ways that you can think of? If not, that's okay too.
Pleasure in any other way? Maybe the pleasure of also the pleasure of enjoying who I am, enjoying my sexuality, being able to be free enough, being able to be at a place where I can get resources that will help me to find more of my sexuality. Definitely pleasure has been there too, in finding the extent of who I am and knowing that it is okay, not having to not say what I feel or what I want or what I desire to in any other way. So definitely I found a lot of pleasure in finding who I am sexually and enjoying it and living it without fear.
That's beautiful, Brian. That it sounds like you've gotten to a place where you're comfortable enough to be able to explore what that means for you, right?
I am, yeah. I feel like it's taken time, but that's where the community also helps. Having community to make you feel strong enough to say, hey, I'm enjoying myself sexually too, and that's not bad. It's okay.
Right. So I only have two more questions for you. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you wish for yourself?
What do I wish for myself? That's an interesting question, because I've always thought of myself as someone that wants to think of how to help others too, but at the same time, I know that I have to be good with myself so that I can help others too. So what I wish for myself is to keep being a light of others, for others, for sure. Continuing growing into who I am, being more accepting and breaking every single taboo that my mind had about being queer, not having to, not having to overthink, did I say that in a feminine way or in a mask, taking those strips out, taking those little things out. It's almost like a cleaning process, a self-cleaning process of checking every single thing in your personality to say, I'm showing that I'm someone open, and that me being like that will help someone else into noticing that the only result is freedom and happiness and being proud of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with me, your wishes, and, even in you saying this cleaning process, right? It almost sounds like there's unlearning there, right? And I think in learning, when we're able to learn who we are, right, there's also a process that we have to unlearn, right? All of these things that we were told, right? That aren't necessary anymore. And so, I'm a big believer in manifestation. And so I manifest,
manifesting is very important. Yes.
Yeah. So I manifest, that these wishes, right, become a reality, and that you are able to continue being this light, and in me knowing you and the time that I have known you, I can say that you've been a light in my life,
Thank you. I feel like I've definitely grown, but in order to get there, you really have to go through the journey. Mm-hmm. And of course, having the right people there, it's so important too. It's so important to have the right people. And I feel like since you've met me from now, I've healed, helped myself, enjoyed myself, accept myself too, in many ways. So I'm very aware, proud, and I take ownership of my journey. Yeah, I take ownership of my journey in a very proud way. I have no fear of it, and literally that's what I wish for others.
Yeah. And, yeah. I was just gonna ask, what do you wish for queer Peruvians?
Ooh, wait, let me actually charge my phone, because I don't want it to die in the middle of a call. That's where I'm heading to right now. Let me charge it too. So you were saying, what do I wish for Peruvians?
Yeah, queer Peruvians.
Queer Peruvians. Okay. Do you hear your own voice?
I hear you.
Oh, okay, you hear me perfectly?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. So, wow, okay, so definitely freedom and resources, and that a sense of community, it's just not a word, that it becomes part of their lives, that they can find a leaning shoulder to help themselves too, to accept the falls and these and also to embrace, to learn from those, and to embrace who they are, to love who they are, to love where they came from. All of those things come to my mind, for it to be a much more accepting, a much more loving, much more open society.
Yeah, absolutely. And you naming, the need for resources, right? To have access to those resources. But
extremely necessary.
Yeah, but also, the necessity for community, right? And I know that we've talked a lot about community and what that community has meant for you. And I hear what you are saying in these wishes as well, right? I really do believe that there's something really radical in being able to name them, right? Being able to name what we wish for ourselves and for other people. And I'm also really grateful that you've taken time to share your story with me, that you have, that you reached out in the first place, that you've just, been so radically honest and vulnerable with me as well, as we've talked.
Yeah, I think I think that it's necessary to accept being vulnerable to healing and being vulnerable. Those things that for so long have been seen as maybe not the most positive things, they should actually be positive things. I think if we embrace those, more people will talk. And I think that can only bring positive effects. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful to bear witness to who you are, to your growth, to hear, the journey that you've been on, and to also know you as a friend, to be
Thank you.
To support you and to root for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm so grateful. Is there anything else you wish to share with me before we wrap?
Maybe I would like to add something else, which is a wish for the whole entire queer community. That we don't forget the basics of what brings us together, which is love. I think that should still be in our hearts, in our minds, as a goal, to have honest, reciprocal, and unconditional love. Yeah.
I'm holding, what you just said, about love in this Cancer season,
Oh yes, Cancer season. Woo.
And
it's important. It's important to keep it in our minds, to not forget our north.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That love, so important. And I think for me, in my queerness and my Peruvianness, I've been able to find a lot of that love right on that journey.
That's awesome. That's a blessing. We should all have that. That shouldn't be a gift. It should be just there for all of us. So yeah, that's definitely a wish for the whole queer community.
Thank you, Brian. And yeah, I have loved talking to you. I've loved hearing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you have more to add, please do. If there's anything that you would like to share.
No, I'm grateful too. I'm happy too. I'm glad that you got to know a little bit more about me, which is awesome. I think that's really cool. And at the end of this, I think this is a win-win situation for everybody. For those that are speaking what they feel, but for you to also hear the story is so important. It's it's another reciprocity cycle of just happiness and love. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
Awesome.
Those are all the questions that I have. So
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay.